Hi, I'm Dina, and in today's video I'm going to be creating this adorable patchwork quilted card using my new stamp set called Little Makers by Gina K Designs that I illustrated for their July release. Hopefully you were able to catch that release party on Tuesday night. Lots of fun stuff going on there, including some Christmas. As you can see, my stamp set has been dearly loved already. I have a lot of friends who love to sew and even more who love to quilt, so I'm having a lot of fun working with this stamp set so far. So for today's project, I'll be using the pincushion and the spool of thread. And I'll probably throw in a sentiment as well. I'm also going to be using Master Layouts 14 for the base panels of my project, which will fit perfectly on an A2 size card. But I'm only going to be using the matte die and the stitch perforated panel for this die set today. I'm using a limited color palette just to keep everything in harmony and unified. I think these colors work really well together. They reminded me of the perfect fabric colors for a quilt. It's a really good idea to test your colors on the paper you'll be using, so I swiped my ink pads across the mixed media paper. Today I'm using Sweet Mango, Butterscotch, Light Cranberry, Warm Glow, and Whisper. And I'll also be stamping my images with Obsidian Amalgam ink because it's waterproof, which is really important because my technique today will be a watercolor effect, and it will ensure that my ink won't bleed on my paper. I'll also be using several silhouette stamps. This one is Natural Silhouettes, Courtyard Silhouettes, Wild Blossoms, Friendly Silhouettes, and I'm going to be adding some texture using the Petite Flourish embossing folder. I'll also be using several other supplies that I'll point to as we go along. Okay, so let's get started. For my focal images, I'll be stamping the pincushion and spool of thread with the Obsidian ink on mixed media paper. The mixed media paper has a smooth finish and can accept a lot of different mediums, so it'll be okay to use for a watercolor effect. And I'm going to set them aside to dry while I work on my patchwork panels. So while my pincushion and spool of thread are drying, I'm going to cut out my base panels using Master Layouts 14. I'll be die cutting the matte panel and serrated postage panel on white cardstock. But I'm not going to be using them for postage. Instead, I'm going to create patchwork panels. So for that, I'm going to need to die cut two of these panels. I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to cut along the open dots. Now, you don't have to cut up yours if you don't want to. For instance, if you wanted to use a full background stamp or simply ink blend your panels, you could keep it all together. But for my project, I'm cutting them up so I can stamp each panel individually with a different design for a quilted look, which is why I'm using all those silhouette stamps that I just showed you. I'm going to start off with the two square panels, and I'm going to ink blend the edges with Warm Glow to add some interest, but also to add some contrast. I'm only going to do the very edges of the panels. I'm not going to go too far into the squares. I'm using the Warm Glow amalgam ink, and it's very light, but it's very pretty, and it's exactly the look I'm going for. I'm going to use Whisper for the two small rectangle panels. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to ink blend the very edges of these panels. Being careful not to have the ink flow too far into the little rectangles. And once my edges are ink blended, I'm going to stamp each one with a different silhouette stamp. So the first one I'm going to use is a beautiful little floral cluster from the Friendly Silhouette stamp set. And I'm just positioning the stamp so I get the best part of the stamp on my panel. On the other panel, I'm going to use another floral cluster from the Courtyard Silhouette stamp set. Now, of course, you can use any stamps that you'd like, but these just happen to attract my attention because of their size, and I wanted to keep a floral theme going. So I position the stamps just the way I want them, and I'm going to stamp them with light cranberry dye ink. I stamped them a couple of times, but not too much because I don't want them to be too dark and take away from the focal images that's going to be on the center of my card. Now this panel with the Friendly Silhouette is a little bare, so what I like to do is reposition the stamp again to fill up a couple of more spaces on the panel. If you're going to do this, be sure to clean your stamp in between this step. The results are so delicate and pretty, they're perfect for the look I'm going for this patchwork. Now for the rectangle panels, I will first use the bouquet of flowers from the Courtyard Silhouettes. And again, I'm positioning the stamp in such a way to complement my panel. And for the other panel, I'm going to use the tree limb from the Natural Silhouette stamp set. I'm stamping these both panels with Sweet Mango dye ink. And I have to say, I fell in love with the little tiny birds in this set, so I'm going to be stamping one of those as well. Okay, so here are my panels that I stamped. But now I want to add a little texture to the patchwork. So I'm going to be embossing the other two square panels with the Petite Flourish embossing folder for a very delicate look. Now I need one more panel as a grounding panel for my pincushion and spool of thread. So for this I'm using Master Layouts 4, and I'm just going to use the postage stamp die that's in this set. Okay, so let's assemble what we have so far. I'm going to take my matte panel, which I die cut with white cardstock, and attach it with some glue to a piece of heavy weight craft cardstock. And then I'm going to set it aside to dry. Now going back to my patchwork panels, I'm going to cut off all the perforated edges, being very careful to leave all the stitching. And I'm going to do this for each one of the panels. It's a process, but it's worth it. Now you can really start to see the blended edges up against the white panel. How does that look so far? I really like this. Okay, now I'm going to attach my quilted panels using double-sided adhesive for dimension. I just love to add dimension to my cards, and in this case, it's really going to highlight each patchwork panel. For my own sake, or should I say safety, I will add some glue to my double-sided adhesive because I want to make sure I place each panel perfectly in their place. So the glue is going to give me some wiggle room to adjust my panels to line up perfectly with the perforation on the base panel. I'll do this for each one of the panels. And then I'm going to attach some double-sided adhesive to the full panel so I can attach it to my solid base for an even more dimension. It's a really good idea to make sure you have enough foam adhesive across your panels in case you're wanting to mail it. Your card won't bend or warp in certain places. You want to make it nice and solid without wasting too much product. I'm going to do the same for my grounding stamp panel that I'm going to use underneath my focal images, and I'm going to place it right in the center of the patchwork. Oh, I don't want to cover that little bird. I love that little bird. I love him so much. Okay, so now it's time to have some fun with painting. I love the look of watercolors, and I know a lot of people don't have watercolors, but most of you probably have inks. So today I'm going to create a watercolor effect using the dye inks to paint my images. So for this you'll need to be able to smear your ink on a non-porous surface such as a glass mat, acrylic block, or even a dish. We will need to add a little bit of water to our ink, so whatever you have that's non-porous will work. I'm using a water brush as my paintbrush simply for the ease of it. A water brush is a super easy way not to have to dip my paintbrush constantly in water. I can just squeeze out a little bit of clean water as I need it. As with watercolors, you need to start from light to dark. So I started off by laying in some color on my pincushion with light cranberry. And now I'm going to lay some butterscotch in on my spool of thread. It's really important to let your paint dry in between layers. Otherwise, all you're really going to do is just keep adding water to your paper instead of actually adding color. So allowing the paper and the paint to dry in between layers will make it possible to deepen your colors. I'm using a thin piece of mixed media paper, not by choice, but it's all I had hanging around. But I'll remedy that later. I'm going to go ahead and finish off this painting, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, now that my painting is finished, I'm just adding a little bit of highlights with my white Jelly Roll pen. Just here and there. Trying not to overdo, but just accentuate a few things. And now I'm going to die cut my images using the coordinating dies that come with the Little Maker stamp set. Everything in this stamp set has a coordinating die, even the sentiments. But as I mentioned before, my paper is very thin, so I'm going to die cut a couple more pieces using regular cardstock and glue them to the back of my images to give them some stability. And I'm going to connect the spool of thread and the pin cushion together using some glue, and then I'm going to add some double-sided adhesive to the back of both of them and attach them to my postage grounding panel. Now it's a really great idea when you're adding foam adhesive to place them across both images to reinforce their connection. And off camera, I stamped and die cut one of the sentiments from Little Makers. This one says "So Very Special," and I'm adding some thin foam strips to the back of the sentiment with some glue, and I'm just going to pop it up in the corner of my card. Now to finish off my project, I'm going to add this panel with double-sided adhesive to an A2 card. I'm using white cardstock, but depending on your color choices, you can use whatever works best for you that coordinates with your project. All right, so now just a few of my favorite mixed pearls by Gina K Designs. I'm thinking I'm going to use silver. Silver will look best with this project. Just adding a few because I don't want to take away from what we've done so far. And there it is. So Very Special Patchwork Quilted Card. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this project today and will give it a try yourself. I will have all of Gina K Design supplies that I used in this video linked in the description, and a full supply list on my coordinating blog post. And if you'd enjoyed this video today, please consider giving me a like, subscribe to my channel so I can continue to bring you more videos, tips, and of course lovable crafting projects. And be sure to hit the bell to be notified when I drop another video. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.